we knew this was going to happen, by the way. We were very confident that this was going to happen. But this, just talking to Nigel, we've agreed that this really is the inflection point. I think this is the moment where the Conservatives really do pack up, they take the ball and they go home.
Adam, I know polling doesn't translate into seats, but this is seismic for Reform.
Yeah, there's another poll which I think has the Conservatives on 18 and Reform on 17.
Redfield and Wilton,
yeah. But, I mean, yeah, it is seismic. I mean, it's symbolic, of course, because there is worry in Conservative ranks about the effect of Nigel Farage and arguments over the extent to which they should embrace Reform's policies. This will certainly put the wind up and make some people argue that the party should go in Reform's direction. It's also worth bearing in mind that we're now getting a run of polls with the Conservatives below 20% vote share. And if the Conservatives do get a vote share below 20%, we really are in Canada 1993 territory. I mean, the chance of a real collapse of the Conservative Party to the point where the Liberal Democrats would be the main opposition party to Labour.
Yeah, look, if we're to get to that point, and this has been an ongoing question over the past few weeks, whether it's fuelled by a comment from Suella Braverman, the former Home Secretary, or otherwise, if the Conservative Party do get to that point, should they, do you feel that they will look to someone like Nigel Farage to form some sort of coalition with, and I mean a coalition, a brand new party, a brand new look?
Well, they might, and it would really depend on which MPs survive to decide the future of the parliamentary party after the election, and whether they are prepared to put the leadership into the hands of the into the hands of the membership, who have tended to go for the most right-wing candidate consistently, and who might well be tempted to go for Nigel Farage. You know, this small group of probably around 100,000 elderly people, elderly active Conservatives. So, we can't direct what's going to happen. What we do know is what happened in Canada, which is that the Conservatives were out of power for more than a decade. They then came back when the party, which was called Reform, not the same thing, merged with the rump of the old Conservative Party. They called themselves the Conservatives, and a lot of people would actually argue that the policies followed by the Canadian Conservatives subsequently were much closer to the old Conservative Party than the more radical Reform Party. So, it can take a long time in politics, but that may be where it ends up.
Yeah, so just a reminder to you, if you're just tuning in right now, there's a YouGov survey. This is for the Times, and for the first time ever, it's called a crossover moment. Reform has overtaken the Conservatives. So Reform support has increased by 2 points to 19%. The Conservatives remain unchanged on 18%. So there's now a gap in Reform's favour of 1%. Labour maintain their 19-point lead over the Conservatives. Lib Dems drop a few to 14%, and that could just be some of the initial flurry around their manifesto dying out there. But the significant thing here is the support for Reform, and YouGov have commented on that, and they say, obviously all polls have a margin of error. We can't say for certain that more voters now back Nigel Farage's party over the Conservatives. What it does make clear is that at the very least, the Conservatives and Reform are at a very similar level of support for each other, and we've seen that not just in this poll, but with the point difference in the other direction. We've now seen that from four polls in total.
But bear in mind, what are Labour on in that poll?
Today?
Yeah.
Well, they're 19 points ahead of the Conservatives.
And what are they on?
Conservatives are on 18. So 37 for Labour.
37, so they're just on Reform and the Conservatives together, and they're about neck and neck.
Interesting, very interesting. So yeah, a remarkable moment, I think it's fair to say. So there is now a percentage point difference between both Reform and Conservatives, with Reform in front. It's a crossover point. David Bull is Deputy Leader of Reform UK and joins me now. David, good evening.
A very good evening to you too.
Give me the rundown. Why is support for Reform growing in the polls? Is it support for Reform, or is it disillusionment with the Conservative Party?
Well, look, people are sick and tired of what is going on in this country. We did this party election broadcast tonight. We said Britain is broken. Nothing works in this country. And people around the country are saying, I understand that. You know, transport doesn't work. There are potholes everywhere. They feel that actually they don't keep the money they earn. We live in a high tax, high regulation, low growth society. Entrepreneurs are being penalised. So we feel that we knew this was going to happen, by the way. We were very confident that this was going to happen. But this, just talking to Nigel, we've agreed that this really is the inflection point. I think this is the moment where the Conservatives really do pack up, they take the ball and they go home. What is the point? And this goes back to a much bigger issue, actually.
I think just to interrupt you, the prospect of the Conservative Party packing up right now and going home 3 weeks before a general election is, well, you probably couldn't get polling on that because it's very unlikely indeed. Let's talk about let's just talk about the direction ahead. What is more likely, what is more possible, is that the Conservative Party loses the next election and comes to Reform, or Reform goes to the Conservative Party, and you talk about working together, because Labour's on 37% on this poll, and so are the Conservatives and Reform combined, level pegging. So two forces, one force in Labour and two forces combined in the Conservative Party and Reform. Are you open, David, to those conversations with the Conservative Party?
What, now? Absolutely not.
After the election.
Well, look, let's take things one step at a time. The fact is that we've done this before, haven't we? We stood down. We gave the Conservatives an 80-seat majority and they completely squandered it. So right now we are concentrating on really actually being an effective opposition. And the point I was going to make earlier, when people say,
How can you be an effective opposition? You are slated to get between 0 and 3 seats. How can you be an effective opposition with 3 seats?
Well,
I'm being generous.
Say the only poll that actually counts, obviously, is the general election. But look, we're a small insurgent party. We're David versus Goliath here. These other parties have got millions of pounds to spend, and actually we're doing this on a shoestring budget, and actually what we're seeing is a groundswell of people coming up saying that actually they want change in this country. When you listen to the debate, like the one last night, we heard the same old tired rhetoric. We saw Keir Starmer today announce absolutely nothing. And when you look at what he actually said, it's really about what he didn't say.
He didn't announce anything new, but he certainly had a lot to announce. When are we seeing your full details? Full details of all your pledges?
So instead of a manifesto, we have a contract with the people. We've been working on that for years, actually. But it will be published in full. The final draft, the final version will actually be published next week.
So you're going to have a contract with the people. Are we going to have to sign it?
We will be signing it, because this is the point, actually. You know, the whole point about this is to say that we're trying to do politics differently, and people are sick and tired of politicians promising everything and delivering absolutely nothing. And what we've done is we published the draft contract, and people have responded to that, and we've amended it and changed it. We've been in touch with police officers, for example, and nurses and doctors. My background, we've been talking about how we can make this country great once again. It's a shambles. And going back to where I come from, the NHS, we've got these two main parties saying, well, we're going to chuck more money at it. What, more than £176 billion? It's broken. We need to think about how we provide healthcare that remains free at the point of need, that allows people to have world-class care, which, quite frankly, they're not getting.
Look, let's just step aside from that a second and just talk about you as an effective opposition. And I'll say again, because of the way the system works in this country, you will feel, in fact, I know you think that is, weighted against small insurgent parties like yours, because whereas you're now polling above the Conservatives, that very simply will not translate into seats. And so that is where you're at a disadvantage.
Sure.
The other issue, sorry.
Sure.
The other issue that you've got is that many of your candidates have not been vetted properly. And we've seen issues with 41 candidates found to be friends of a fascist leader on Facebook. Not just that, there are other dubious claims relating to some of those as well. It could be that we get to this general election with you either carrying dubious candidates or having to get rid of them, because it's not it isn't a good look for a young party like yours.
So let's be very clear here. We had a very strict due diligence system put in place, but obviously, like all the other parties, the snap election caught us off guard. So there were some people who actually circumvented that process. It also caught, by the way, the Conservative Party off guard, which is not ideal if you're the governing party. Look, we've been really clear about this, and some of those allegations are not entirely true. Some people like some comments rather than being friends. But I'll say this again. We are very clear that if anyone is found to have spread anything that is racist or anti-Semitic or incites hate or violence, they're out.
Finally, in fact, I've lost your volume, but I think you're back. We are going to see Nigel Farage in action, aren't we, in just a few minutes' time in the latest seven-way leaders debate. Are you there in Salford? And what kind of pep talk? Okay, so give me the inside
I'm
gossip
actually in his
here.
dressing room at the moment.
Is Nigel there as well?
Nigel is
say
on
hello?
set.
Oh, he's on set. Right. Tell me about your pep talk for Nigel this evening. What is he going to come out slinging with?
Nigel is the most effective politician. He doesn't need lessons from me. He's a brilliant orator. He cares passionately. He has fought this campaign. I was with him in the European Parliament. Everyone said he was mad. He was the first person to talk about the number of illegal migrants coming across on small boats. And so he doesn't really need advice from me. But I think just in terms of framing it and making sure that we speak the truth, that we speak to people who are watching that debate, I know he will be brilliant.